We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Again, this is amazing. It seems like forever, but I think it's only been 3 weeks since we recorded the last video. And I'm looking forward to today because we've got a lot going on. And I'm here with two of my best buddiettes in the world. At least we spend an hour or so a week looking at each other's handsome and good looking faces, beautiful, all that. So the point is, today we're going to let's talk about reconnecting and reunion. How does that sound? And I'm with Lisa Sheehan and Jan Jeremias. And again, I'm Bill Carell. I didn't say that before, but uh, I remembered it, and I hope you did too. But my point is, we're going to get started here in a second, and I'd like to just remind you why we do this podcast, because we're up somewhere in the neighborhood, I think, of like 135, 140 episodes that we've done so far, and we do this for the opportunity to cast a pebble into the water, and put a positive, empowering ripple out there where, maybe in some cases they're not present. But in the meantime, this is up to you to choose how to use our conversations, and hopefully we'll be both entertaining. Maybe we'll be a little thought provoking from time to time. But I can tell you one thing for sure: when we get into the conversations, our attention is not interested at all in what anybody else thinks while you're listening to it. Sorry about that, because we just get lost in the convo every once in a while. So if that happens today, tell us to come back and we will, because I know you're not going to watch this for a while. You're out in the future somewhere. But all my friends tell me that all times happen at the same time. So that's why we can hear you and we can pick up on your vibe. Having said all of that, welcome us back quickly. And let me ask both of you, fine friends, what do you think of, what did I actually say? Reunion and
Reconnection.
reconnection. That's very good. Thank you for listening. And how does that sound to you? You have any thoughts on the matter?
So many. No, not really. I mean, I always go with like the first things that come to mind because um, I close with quite a few of my high school friends, and that only happened because we reconnected at a reunion and have since been planning all sorts of gatherings thanks to that.
Mm.
The whole ability, the whole that we actually went to the reunion. Like some people just don't do it, and then we made such a wonderful pact kind of thing. So we have different names. Like there's the 12 pack when 12 of us go away. There's the 6 pack. There's the
That's
Fab
cute.
Five, the Core Four. you know, so it's. I mean, I adore reunions and reconnections. That's just my first thought. So, Jan, you're up.
Yeah. Okay. Oh no, the pressure. Um, I guess I've been thinking about reconnection a lot lately. Um, and the circumstances around which we do connect or we come together, which is usually for joyous occasions or for the opposite. And you're reunited or reconnected with people. And I guess I've been thinking about it around joyous occasions because births, whatever, and then there's deaths, and in a way both extremes in one form or another, like the bringing in of new life, which is amazing, and the ending of a life. And we connect with those that we see at these events, or that we don't see, or that we haven't seen for a long time, and then all of a sudden you come together and you reconnect with them. So that's what I was thinking of as Bill said that.
Pretty interesting. We'll go back and we'll kind of examine the online definition. And for reunion, we've got an instance of two or more people coming together again after a period of separation. And so that implies that there was at one point some sort of a connection or togetherness. A social gathering attended by members of a certain group of people who have not seen each other for some time. Again, there's some kind of a union that gets to be done again, and the act or process of being brought together again as a unified whole. And I like that one because it talks about, like there's almost this corporal or corporeal. I'm not sure which of those would be correct in this instance, but the having to refer to each other as different parts of the whole implies that there is some bond and some connection that was there. It could be work, could be school, it could be an affiliation, and associations for professional purposes, can be a social group, can be some sort of philanthropic body, or maybe a church, or whatever. But it does imply that there was some sort of a bond or a connection before, and so that's kind of a rough view of reunion. Now, reconnection is really cool because it just says first noun form of reconnect. Thank you very much for that. And then it's okay, but when there's a verb, you get more words. Connect back together, it says for the verb. Surgeon had to reconnect tendons, nerves, and veins, reestablish a bond of communication or emotion. I like that one a lot better for our purposes. However, it's kind of interesting that the example again uses the body as kind of like the metaphor, or a simile. It is like a body in terms of how we're all connected to each other, where we may not have the same role or the same status or the same anything, but we have a connection because of our agreement to belong to a group. So now, with that in mind, we've had, I think, this is 3 full weeks since we had our last little roundtable chat here. And what I've been noticing about the time in between, um, is I missed it. You know, I can't speak for you, but Jan, based on your heads up text yesterday, obviously it was coming up for you as something that you'd like to do again, and I'm really glad we're here. I think the expectation of having a reconnection or a reunion in the future, um, gives a really powerful present, in my mind. And thinking about, for instance, when I shared a picture of this restaurant on shipboard while I was on vacation called Oceans, I could just about picture what Lisa's face would look like, given her last name is Sheehan. So, and the neat part of it is we discovered that location for breakfast after about our third or fourth day. And when we went to breakfast there, we saw this big sign on the wall. Ships are huge. It took us 2 to 3 days to discover it was there. Then we had breakfast there every single day afterwards. So I'm just recounting a reconnection and a reunion story. Those are our two words for today, Mr. Ken. Welcome aboard. Ken Caputo just joined us, and we're kind of talking about what our thoughts are in terms of reunion and reconnection. But a lot of it, from the definitions online, has to do with getting back together after being apart, and that implies that there's some sort of a relationship in an organization or part of a whole, like a group. And so, with all of that said, you're a quick study. You come up to speed very quick, and I'm curious about how this reunion is for you, since I haven't seen your wonderful visage for 3 weeks.
It's, it's kind of funny. It's like what good connections always are. The time away, just when you get back together, it's like there was no time away. It just kind
Exactly.
of picks right back up where you left off.
Yeah, I'm sure all of our listeners have exactly someone's face or name in mind right now while you're speaking.
Yeah.
So the neat part of it, what I was saying, I don't know if you heard this or not, was that um, looking forward to a planned reunion of some sort in the future allows you to pre-experience that get together again before it happens, And in some cases, it may be based on a last experience that wasn't cool, or it may have been, the years have changed your memory of how things occurred over a long period of time in a relationship with other people that were part of the group. And now it's something where you really can't wait to get back together again. Or, and I've seen this happen in our high school reunion from time to time, where we reconnect with somebody after 10 or 15 years, because we just had our 50th high school reunion, this last fall. And there were people who came for the first time ever who had decided for the first 49 years that if they never saw anybody from our high school again, it would be too soon. So, and they finally showed up and they had the time of their life. And I think Lisa had a really quick uh, thing that's come out of her reunion as well, in terms of how you name your groups based on who shows up after that. But there's a real familial feeling to those folks that have reconnected in our reunions from my high school class, starting with about 10 years ago. So there's a group of us that get together, between 20 and 30 different people, not always the same people, but I'm going to remember what you said this year, Lisa. You know, we will be the doozy dozens, or whatever we are
Right.
when we go.
Right. We have a baker's dozen too, because that's sometimes a 13th.
13th, yes. That's a good dozen. So what would be a reunion at the moment, is if you start thinking about, if you were going to plan a reunion, like at the moment, we clear the space and there's an opportunity for you to go through your memory and start to pick um, maybe some folks that you ran with for a while, for one reason or another, socially or with work or college or professionally. What sort of a gathering seems to come to mind that would be worth doing?
I always go to well, we just had a small gathering with my grandmother's niece, who's in her 90s, and she had 12 children, three of which were girls. So I have two sisters, so the three girls, and the mom met just to catch up, because she sends cards to every single one of us, like regardless of what level cousin we are. For every birthday, everybody gets a birthday card from her, so it's just amazing. So, and we used to have family reunions, but it would still have to be cut off at different, it was another side of the family. So it'd be, I'd like to think of some way to bring, I don't know how how would we define the group so much, but we always talk about it. We used to have them, like I said, and then they kind of fell to the wayside. And but that's the first thing that came to mind, was a family reunion. Of which family I don't know, but something like that.
If you're here, you're family, right? You must be. We have just one of those family reunions coming up in June. We have pretty successful family reunions over the last 20 years, every 5 years or so. It was supposed to happen either last year or the year before and didn't because of COVID, but we're doing it this year. So just the short story is when we first went to a reunion back in the early 2000s, my mom was one of eight siblings. Her oldest brother um, and two other sisters had passed at that time, but there were still five, all women, aunts that showed up for this. And I bet you we had 40 people there. Well, the last reunion that we had, we were down to three aunts. My mother was no longer there. And I've lost two of those aunts in the last 20 months. And there's one remaining aunt who was actually 9.5 years younger than the next youngest child. But the last one that we went to, we had 70 people there.
Cool.
And what was remarkable was it was the largest crop of babies. There were, a dozen, 15 children under the age of 5 or 6. Absolutely remarkable.
I feel the same way, Bill, because I was just got back from my brother's, and my brother now has, I think it will be 10 grandchildren less than the age of 6.
Wow.
So, um, yeah. So just to me, immediate family right now has gotten to be quite large. And the fact that I'm a great aunt freaks me out so many times. And the fact that my brother's a grandfather, like, you know, 14 times or something, it's like, how did that happen? But he happens to be the best grandfather. I mean, they love him. And so, yeah, just immediate family right now. I'm just, how can I um, stay connected to them with, for whatever reason, differences and everything, and can that just be set aside between us all and just maintain connection?
So I've been wondering, if you folks have any traditions when you get back together with relatives or family or something. In our reunion, typically there is a T-shirt that's printed up,
Mhm.
uh, and one of them was printed up using the Survivor theme with something like outplay, outlive, or no, outplay, outeat, and outlove. Uh, you know, and pictures of my grandparents, Lloyd and Edna, who started all of this back in the 1920s. I mean, for God's sake. And it's remarkable to me because last year, the year before, was supposed to be the centennial of when they got married, and we'll celebrate this time. But if you add up all of their progeny, it's like 160 people. It's remarkable. They had 8 children, but my grandmother, God bless her, she had 6 miscarriages too. The oldest was 29 years younger, I mean, older than the youngest, my Aunt Claudia, who is still here now.
Amazing.
It's a long time to be making babies.
Mhm.
So my question that I want to ask you is, do you have, like, the T-shirt thing is cool? I'm sure some that will do that and all, different sizes and everything. But is there something else that you've had at one of your get-togethers, or maybe not even a family one, just any reunion whatsoever, that made it kind of special and was kind of a nice memento?
I think photographs, because
Mm.
one of the things I did after COVID, well, during COVID, I hadn't seen my folks in like 2 years, with COVID shutdowns and where they live and I live. And when they came to visit, I hired a professional photographer, and I actually had photos taken. And let me tell you, now that my father has passed,
Yeah.
that photo is like priceless to me, of my parents and I in Tonka, of course. And um, because he's a member of the family. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, so I was thinking about that recently, about what was I going to get my mother for Mother's Day. And I was thinking of some sort of photo book, I think, whether that be current or old photos. I think that's what I think of when I think of capturing a moment.
Interesting that you say that, Jan. As my dad was in the process of the last week of his life, my sister had put together on the television every day he'd get a different slideshow of
Mhm.
pictures, and it gave him so much peace and was such just kind of a cool way to, you know, see his life, his awesome life and
Mhm.
all of the people he'd impacted. And it wasn't just family, it was friends and pets and just all of it. So, yeah, so it was just a constant scroll of memories that he was just, he was just in a hospital bed in their place, and just it was pretty cool. I would just sit there and hold his hand and we would watch them together. Didn't even have to talk about it because we would remember, or he'd
Mhm.
remember, and it would maybe something that didn't involve me. And It didn't matter, but yeah, very powerful.
I mean, the other thing that my brother has done a number of times is actually recorded interviews with my parents through the years. And so even just recording conversations, things like that, are a great way
Mhm.
to capture moments in time.
Mhm.
Like in a couple, like even school, memorabilia of any kind, people bring families too. It could be anything, which is fun. And pictures on, we've done pictures on mugs or, pictures on different things like Jan said and Ken said, using pictures are like to basically, my thought is to reunite with your past too, reconnect with everybody's past
Yeah.
kind of thing.
At our reunion last fall, they did a couple of cool things. One was they had taken a high school yearbook and they'd taken all of the pages and photocopied them and then put them on a big old board so that everything that was in the high school yearbook, people could just walk along and, oh yeah, that's Mr. Ofsiani, that's Miss Pesh, et cetera, et cetera. And the other neat thing that they did is they went back and they found a whole bunch of editions of our high school newspaper, some of which had pictures in them. Yeah, and so there were neat things like that, and then other people had collections of different articles that had been in local newspapers, the New London Day, the Groton News, and there used to be like a penny saver that was called Compass. So many of us had our pictures in those, and all the football players and the wrestlers, and so that was all kind of cool too. And they also had uh, the last thing that I remember that I thought was really cool is this is for from here on out. They had made a frame, and the frame was like 3 feet high by about 2.5 feet wide, and it says, you know, uh, class of 1972, Ledyard High School, 50-year reunion 2022. So we walked around the room just putting this frame around different groups of people, and then they
Oh
took
yeah,
Mhm.
very cool. That was just so fun. But
that's a good idea.
after spending an evening with all those folks, I think we ended up with close to 70 people there, including spouses and whatnot. But there was not a single negative thing that happened all evening. It was just people that were so
Mm.
happy to be together. And we did hear from a couple who said, I've never been to another reunion. And and that they said it publicly in front of everybody because we all got turns at the microphone and everything, and so we all laughed, and then people went and stood in line to give them a hug. It was very cool. Reunion and reconnection. So sometimes it's a group, sometimes it's a person. you know you want to ask yourself every once in a while, occasionally, just reflect on this question: how many best friends have I had in my entire life? That's an interesting one to dwell on for a minute.
I, Mine has basically been on like where you are geographically or school. My best friend Little was across the street. Grade school, grade school, middle school, high school, but and then college. That's where. But then I kept all the ones before too. So
Right.
the
Yeah,
list of friends.
having a new best friend doesn't mean the other one's not still your best friend.
Right, right.
As Stephen
And
Stills said,
that could be, decades that I don't see somebody because my high school friend lives in California. We drove out and moved to California together, and I came home and she stayed. So,
yeah,
but I haven't seen her in almost 5 years. But we're still, if like I always say, when you connect again, it's like no time passed. Like Ken was saying,
Mhm.
there's nothing.
yeah.
There's no
See,
strangeness, no nothing.
it's interesting when that happens when there's been like, the time was during like a key developmental arc. So like we've had this very interesting thing over the last 5 or 6 months where students have come back who, like they trained with us for 12 years, left to go to college at 18. Actually one woman just came back. It's been 15 years plus since she's trained. She's a PhD now, and she's all grown up, what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
but at the same time, first words out of her mouth when she came back and took a class is, "I'm home." It was, so there's this interesting familiarity while simultaneously just not even the same human on any level, because how could you be? Like you can
Mhm.
see the memories of who she was as a child, reflected, and just the experiences. But it's really kind of cool how you've got that connection is still present, that's deeper than any of the learned behaviors, education, environmental changes. All of that is secondary to just the human connection, the relationship. It's kind of cool. We've had a few of those recently. It's been very interesting.
Mm.
Well, I think what you're saying is I find it interesting. I have one friend who we've been friends forever. And just even though we are very different, there is this thread of history of knowing someone for that long, through so many different changes. And still, yet there's still that thread that still maintains that connection. And that will always be there, um, whether they're physically here or not.
It's also interesting the discipline it requires to train yourself to see them for who they are, not for who they were.
Hmm.
Especially with kids because they change so quickly. And we had a really weird thing. I mean, we saw kids, we didn't see their lower faces for 2 years, and that's a long time. Like all of a sudden, they're taking their masks off, and it's like, oh my god, we don't even recognize them at first. It
Mhm.
was, it was fascinating, and it was a very stark reminder of the fact that we're not fixed entities. We're in a state of change and evolution, and so you have to find ways to keep that in mind, as the relationship just travels.
I have the opposite thing too. Like I can still see the 3rd grade face on some of my, like I could see that face in them still. And other people, "Oh, they got so old." I said, "No, I still see that 10-year-old there. I could still see that face." It's amazing sometimes.
Well,
Just
my
remind
close friend, when we're together, it's interesting because I think she brings out a part of me that I don't often, probably since I know her so long, that I don't necessarily show to many people.
Mm. I think that's true of, I mean, your best friends, I think, see the most of you, but then there's like the fringe friends that see, you have for certain reasons or connections. So they don't, you only show that side. You only need to show that side of you, but it's kind of cool, yeah, like you said, to bring that piece out back up.
there was an interesting thing. I love that word. When we were growing up, we moved cross country from my mom's family. They were all in Nebraska and Denver. And we were quite a long way from where my dad was raised too, in Detroit, Michigan. So we ended up in Connecticut. And over our first, 6 or 7 years of leaving Denver and moving to Cheyenne and then upstate New York, whenever we get back together with cousins, wasn't a reunion. We had no reunions back in those days, but we get together and then we wouldn't go to sleep.
Mhm.
That went on into our 20s and 30s, and it was a practice with my siblings as well. If we hadn't seen each other for a while because living in different states and whatnot, get together, for some sort of an occasion, and then stay up until 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning, having
Mhm.
fun, playing silly games, just being people.
Laughing till you cry, or you can't go to sleep because you just keep making each other crack up.
I'm going to tell you what, hysterical.
Mhm.
My family could be picked out of a crowd from 1,000 feet away just by listening to my sisters or my aunts cackle. They had the most wonderful, raucous, I don't care what people think kind of laugh as a group function. It just very, very cool.
Well, it's interesting when you're somewhere and there's very strong like genetics, familiar like feature genetics in my family for especially within the males. And you know, where I have cousins who've been or my, abroad or whatever, and people will come up to them and say, "Are you related to?" And they are. There's just
Mhm.
very, very strong. And so that and we all laugh alike. Yeah, there's a laugh.
That was the thing, like, my sisters and I don't look alike at all, but our gestures are the same somehow, so people know we're related just by spending a little bit of time with us. They say, "Oh, yeah, I can see the relationship now."
That's fun. So apparently there are chromosomes for that, or at least tribal behaviors.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Wanted or otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I think there are a couple of people that I'd like to reconnect with. Um, my on my dad's side of the family, his older sister had two girls, and I haven't seen either one of them since the 1980s. We just drifted apart, and they kind of went and did their thing, and we just seem to never make the connection again. And it would be kind of fun because we had a lot of get-togethers, and one of our first, the ones where that you kind of get that relationship cemented. Uh, I think we were about 12 years old when my grandfather passed away back in 1968. 14 years old, I guess. But the point is he, that occasion made us all. We made pacts that we would never get far apart again, and we took some of his old 1964 Kennedy half dollars and drilled holes in them and made necklaces out of them. And the next two or three times that we got together, we'd all wear our Kennedy half dollars that used to belong to Grandpa.
So,
And now we haven't seen each other since probably 84 or 85. Did I say 30 years? My math
I
is
was
not so
appalled, yeah. I was appalled I was looking at something in that the 1990s are now vintage.
I know.
Oh.
True story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everything from the 90s is now OG.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to find out what that meant. I had to look it up. I was listening to somebody called Blake Shelton OG on the you know the show the Voice the other night, and it stands
Original
for
gangsta.
Original Gangsta.
They do it everywhere now.
I know. I thought it might just stand for old guy, or
I
so we're having a spring that feels like a spring. You know what I mean? Like some years we don't have this kind of growth or green on the ground or flowers on the trees until first week of May. And it's remarkable. I look out my back window from the kitchen, into my backyard, and we've got these beautiful magnolias. There's some white star magnolias, and then I have the traditional sort of pink and white magnolias. These trees are 30 feet tall now.
Mm.
We planted them when we moved here in the late 70s and early 80s, but they're trees now. and they are
Yeah.
just awesome. And what I'm looking
That's a
forward, yeah.
yeah. That's like a reunion. Every time I
Well,
see the bulbs come up and stuff, and then the cold that hit, walking around, and I'm gonna just hang in there. It's coming back. Sorry about
well,
the frost.
yeah, the crocuses and the hyacinths and all the little bulby things, the small ones, they all were up before we hopped on the cruise, and during that 10 days, most of them went by. There were still some that were left, but now all the bigger bulbs are coming up.
Mm,
Jonquils and daffodils and tulips and all that. They're getting ready to go.
glued like they
But
do.
you know what my best friend is that I'm waiting for? About 3 weeks from now. Um, my home is a it's a farmhouse, and we have a barn, and it was originally probably about a 45-acre farm in the city of Willimantic. But all through what looks like a meadow, going through the barn and the outbuilding garage that we have down the hill, it just comes in with all of these wildflowers, carpet of blue, pink, and white violets. And it
Mm.
looks like something out of, if you have you ever seen the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams?
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You remember the scene with all of the flowing red, green, and blue flowers over all of the hillsides and everything, where he got a glimpse of what, but one instant after coming out of the throes of purgatory or wherever they were together, he sees this beautiful countryside with all of these flowers and this beautiful sky. Well, that's what the backyard looks like too.
Mhm.
So I don't mow it until
Mm.
all those violets die away. And sometimes that's not till like the 20th of May. I have a feeling it'll be a little earlier than that this year because things are just popping. That's a reunion I'm looking forward to. And I love sharing that with pictures on Facebook and everything with my friends.
Well, and that's a movement too. The no mow May. To
Yeah.
not mow your grass for the entire month of May,
Yeah.
so that can happen. Enjoy the insects. Let the insects live on a nice, tasty buffet.
Absolutely. And, I welcome all the dandelions. I have
Mhm.
two brothers, they obsess over their yards in terms of getting the Chemlon guy in there. And we don't do that. We have kind of like a little bee sanctuary over here. And we're very, very happy that they're here. And we frankly don't even care what the thing looks like. It looks like a meadow that's supposed to go along with an old farmhouse. Sorry.
There's a cartoon of a little boy saying, "Mommy, do we eat the grass?" And she goes, "No." He goes, "Well, then why do we grow it?"
Interesting. And spend thousands of dollars a year trying to make it look perfect.
Yeah,
And it never does, or it does for moments at a time. Yeah.
it's a strange concept when you think about it.
Yeah. What's that all about, by the way? Back to the post World War II, all the houses look like ticky tacky and they're all in a row and
Yeah,
charcoal
I remember
burning it.
reading somewhere once that weeds are just something that are growing where you don't want them to.
I must not have any because I just let it go. It's
Yep.
green.
And it flowers. A lot of it flowers. They're so pretty. Some of the things.
Hmm.
Absolutely,
I
Lisa.
guess, like you said, like who decided it was a weed?
I know exactly.
If you have you, I don't know if anybody watches Call the Midwife. Has watched Call the Midwife. It's really great. And there's one scene where one of the nuns, literally, the gardener takes out all the dandelions and he comes back, and one of the nuns has replanted them because she doesn't understand why they're considered weeds. So she replants all the dandelions because to her they're flowers.
And you could eat them.
That's right.
At least the
Right.
leaves. Make wine.
It's interesting. You know, I love our conversations because it's like popcorn going off, in terms of
Mm.
memories and thoughts and all that sort of thing. And I really think that if our listeners are getting half of what I'm getting out of this conversation, I think they're having a ball.
I could hear wheels spinning of who they're going to get together with in the
Yeah.
very near future.
Yeah, like what a neat idea to come up with, huh? Who'd have thunk it? And if you think about it, it's audacious to decide to schedule something.
These days, yeah.
Well, the larger the group, the less likely it's going to turn out the way that you intend or think it will. And the neat part of it is if you're just, mindful and open to whatever comes, it's going to be perfect and beautiful. Just do it.
That's why I always fall back on the two or more are gathered. As long as there's two of you, it's a reunion.
Well, in the Episcopalian Church, we had a saying that said, wherever three or four are gathered, there's a fifth.
I was thinking like the Irish response would be a vodka
Yes.
or scotch. Then there'll be plenty more at the Oceans.
Yeah. It was well, the neat part of it is, and I don't know if you know this, there's always little mini reunions, right? And one of the things that when I moved to Florida at that particular time in the early 2000s, um, there were lots and lots. I mean, probably on the Florida Peninsula, we're probably talking conservatively 800,000 to a million Brits that all bought homes. They kind of ran things, through the course of real estate going sky high in Spain, and then they turned their gaze to Florida, and then they did the same thing, in southern Florida in the Miami area, and then they moved up to Central Florida, Disney, and that sort of thing. There's at least 200 communities that were built in the first 5 years of the 2000s that were designed to be vacation rental homes for Brits. It's in their articles of incorporation and all. It's in the language, right? So that being the case, we got acquainted with some British food because when we moved into Hampton Lakes, bought our first rental property there. Out of 448 owners, 400 of them were Brits. The other 48 homes were owned by people they were either United States citizens or from other countries. We actually had people from 17 different countries by the time that we left uh, Hampton Lakes and sold our last home there in 2019. But the neat part of it is, I'm getting back to a story about food and getting reunionized with it. When I went to Oceans, it made me remember bangers and mash, spotted dick, and also, the British breakfast. Now, if you haven't had a British breakfast, you don't know what I'm talking about. But those of you who have know it's quite distinctive and rather on the large side. So the British breakfast at O'Shea's basically had eggs, any style, bacon, sausage, not bacon or sausage, had both. Then it also had beans, and it had toast, and then here's a kind of a little twist that I'd completely forgot about, but it also has sautéed mushrooms.
Yay.
And so you don't ask for a side of anything with that. And I forgot the potatoes because the hash browns have to be in there too. That was the other thing that I forgot. So I had even forgotten that there was such a thing as a Brit breakfast.
Happy reunion.
Thank you.
Just I went to school. I went to school in England. Went to graduate school there, and I just remember, going and they have a like every day you break for tea. there's a break
Mm.
at 3:30 for everybody to go have tea. And very similar, it seems very civilized. It's just like scheduled in from no matter the level. Like you'd see everybody in the cafeteria. Didn't
Yeah.
matter whether you know, were
Mm.
a custodian or whether you were a professor or a student or whatever. Everybody goes for tea.
Yeah. But we had that down in Florida. We called it happy hour. And somebody had the neighborhood over in their, either their lanai or out by the pool, or open, had the garage door open with a bunch of chairs sitting around, and people just shooting the breeze for hour between 4 and 5, and then everybody at 5 o'clock get up and go do their thing. They did that every single day.
Wow.
And if there were three of us, there were three of us. And if there were 14 of us, there were 14 of us.
And
It
then you
was
have the cultures where, you know, midday meal is really the biggest meal of the day. So where you go first, and they take a real siesta in the afternoon and then you go back. I mean, afterwards, like, whenever that is, 4 o'clock, and then everything's open a lot later. So everything closes at that hour.
yeah.
As a foreigner traveler, it was always very annoying because, everything, like, you'd get to you'd go to exchange money and you'd be at the window and it would be like, you know, one, 1 o'clock, and they were like, sorry, and come back at 4. Be like, but but really nice in the fact that, first of all, probably a lot healthier to eat your largest meal at 1 o'clock
Mhm.
versus eating it very late, and people go home and have a full meal with family or whatever, and then come back.
It's kind of neat, and it's also, I think, very empowering when a culture decides that a routine like that works best if it allows people to be with their loved ones, for a quality part of the day.
Hmm.
And in my personal experience, most of my favorite memories have a large element of eating really special, good food with people I love. And I think that's a kind of a cultural thing too. You can picture or name any culture that you want to, religious or ethnic, or country. There just seems to be a lot of, it's like a matriarchal thing where having a Thanksgiving meal every day is routine. You know, I had some Italian friends, and everybody in the neighborhood would go to their house because not every day, okay, but at least once a week they would have that kind of a meal with 11 or 12 different kind of dishes, and they had to have the neighbors over because the food would go bad or it wouldn't fit in the refrigerator. So we all had a ball.
Well, you go to my sister-in-law bakes all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, neighborhood kids show up constantly throughout the day. And she actually had to start putting a limit on it because it was like you can have so many things at once or whatever.
Yeah.
Or breakfast. Breakfast is a big one. Where all of a sudden, people show up for pancakes, kids show up for pancakes. I think I
Wow.
like it so much because it reminds me of growing up. It reminds me of a simpler times.
It's interesting when was the last time you had pancakes?
Oh, me? Mm, a long time ago.
You probably just had them on the ship, Bill.
Yeah.
I could have, and I didn't. I ate, and let me just put you, in the mind for a moment. Have you ever eaten so much that you would be embarrassed to tell everybody about how much you ate afterwards? I went way past that. I buried that needle, deep in the red zone, had a ball, just basically said, no, we're on a cruise here. I got plenty of time to get, clean up on aisle 7 afterwards. That's not going to be a problem. So I did. And in 10 days, when we got off the ship, I weighed myself when we got home last Wednesday, and I weighed 12 pounds in 10 days, more than I did when I went on shipboard. But since then, 1 week later, I've lost 13. So it's just a matter, like when you're talking about the meat eating after 1 o'clock. That's when I start. I usually begin my intermittent fasting. My first meal has been somewhere between 1:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon, and then I eat within a 4-hour period of that afterwards, and it's huge. I mean, it's really huge. It's like, people look at my pictures of what I'm eating, a whole plate full of salad and shrimp and all that sort of thing, and nope, lost 2 more pounds today. But it's also mind over matter, isn't it? If you don't mind, it doesn't matter.
You're also, I know you make all, you cook a lot and you create your wonderful meals. So I was telling people you can have whatever you want as long as you make it yourself, because that's going to limit them. I know it is because they won't make it. If they do, if you do, you know what's going into it, and it's a healthier meal anyhow. So,
Well, it's neat that you said that, because I average for a dinner time meal somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour, with all the knife work, separate
mhm,
eating things up, sautéing this, that, and the other thing. I enjoy that almost as much as I do the eating part of it.
mhm,
It's ritualistic to me. It's also something, it's that, creating the smells and the aromas and just that whole feeling of well-being, of knowing that I'm in a position. I mean, that's one of the things that tells me that I've got it made. It's not how much it costs. It's just how many different ways can I make something taste and look and feel, and what are the textures to it and the colors, and I just love all of that. I don't know that I'd love it as much just cooking for other people and never being able to eat it myself, but I do love the 2 in combination with each other.
reap the rewards.
So, any updates in the State of the Union before we move on? I think we're getting close to the top of the hour here, and I want to make sure everybody is fully expressed and leaving here with a complete sense of joy and fulfillment, or not.
I'm just kind of hungry now.
It was Bill.
Me too, because I haven't had my first meal of the day yet. I've been
Yeah.
waiting. I was cooking bacon for 45
Oh,
minutes.
God, leaving that smell around, you must be starving.
Oh, it smells so sweet. And when Jan was talking about pancakes, this has a maple sugar smell to
Mhm,
the bacon. And what I do with it is I take over really thick bacon, and I put it into a big pan on low, and I turn it every 8 minutes. So it's just barely rendering off and all the rest of that. All the magic happens in sort of the last 5 or 10 minutes of making the bacon.
wow.
So that's all sitting out there waiting for me. If you want some, pop by, okay?
Yep. Everybody
So
listening, give Bill's address later.
Okay.
just a little pause for any other thoughts that may want to come out today.
The only other reunion that first came to mind, and it just never came up, was my whole focus lately is to reunite with my soul, kind of like my original being. So every class I take seems to be pointing back to that. So I just wanted to mention that too, that there's a reunion and reconnection there too.
I was thinking of that also, Lisa, because I
Oh,
feel like connecting to yourself is in that reuniting or because we become ourselves very fragmented and very divided.
Yep. Taking a moment to just let it be. Let it be. Let it just be the way that it is. You don't have to understand how it is. Just let it be that way.
Mhm.
One of the famous lines that we used to get from our mutual friend Ken was, there's really nothing to worry about. Just do the best you can just for today. Just for now. Just do the best you can for now. I get goosebumps thinking about him.
Me too.
Well, any other final thoughts, folks?
Yep.
Then I would just like to invite you and all of our listeners to reach out to someone in your life. Send them a text, an email, make a telephone call, and let them know that the world's a better place because they're in it. And you know they are. And you can't wait to speak with them again and can't wait for your next reunion. So, from lighting the candle, a world that works, and all of us to all of you, have an amazing week and do not settle for anything better than the best you can do just for right now, just for today. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.